Hello, welcome everyone. If you're just joining us, we'll wait just a few more minutes for more people to come in. My name is Michelle Long and I serve on the board of directors for Clearwater Audubon. Our panelists tonight are Dale Goebel, she's our field trip chair, and Junaid Yilmaz, he is our membership chair. And of course, with recent limits placed on in-person events and meetings, we are so happy to be able to continue to bring quality programs to you, our members, and to the larger community. We're very excited to be able to have new projects that we're working on. So we'll be sharing those through the Wing Beat, a few other places. So stay tuned for that. David, I see your question about not being able to see your video. You can also exit the Zoom and come back in. And sometimes it'll pop up to join with the video and hopefully be able to see everyone. So in the center of your screen, everyone should be able to see at the beginning of a Coyote presentation. And then you have 3 panelists and our guest speaker for this evening. So you should see 4 small, hopefully not too small, people on the side of your Zoom. If you've joined us before, you know that we will have question and answer session. We also may have some interactive questions and you can feel free to use the chat for those. But for the end of the session, for the Q&A, we're going to use the Q&A panel. For most of you, that should look like a speech bubble within your Zoom window. Don't worry, you're not interrupting the speaker with that. And our panelists might be able to answer some of those questions ahead of time. And if you're just joining us, welcome. Our speaker tonight is Lara Milligan. She's a natural resource agent with IFAS, the Extension Pinellas County. And I'm going to go ahead and hand the presentation over to Lara at this time. Thanks so much for having us.
Great. Thank you for having me, and welcome to everyone joining from wherever you are, whether you're here with us in Zoom or on Facebook land or wherever virtual programs reach you these days. So yes, again, my name is Lara Milligan. I'm the Natural Resources Agent for IFAS Extension Pinellas County. My office is actually stationed up at Brooker Creek Preserve. So if any of you guys have never been there, I encourage you to come visit. The preserve is open. Unfortunately, our education center remains closed due to COVID, but so I am blessed to get to work up there every day. I am normally based up there. We're working out of the offices right now, but right now I'm coming to you from home. So hopefully all technology works in my favor. And tonight we're going to learn all about coyotes. So without any further delay, we're going to jump right in. So in today's presentation, these are kind of the big picture topics I'm going to be touching on, which is the history of coyotes, some basic biology, conflicts, which is typically what most people are interested in, or more so the how do we learn to coexist with coyotes here in Pinellas County. So briefly, some history. Oh, and sorry, I know it's on my screen, but my video is covering it. So I'll kind of be moving things around. The map on your screen shows the historical range. So we haven't always had coyotes here in Florida. And actually, when I started this job in 2012, my boss was like, you need to do coyote outreach because they were I mean, they had been in the state a while, but they were a relatively new species. There was a lot of complaints going on and a lot of kind of scare in the community and in Pinellas County. So I did a ton of coyote outreach when I first started and continue to do it today. But historically, you can see on the map, the darker the orange, the more historical the range. So going all the way back to the early 1700s, they were mostly found in central and western United States. Then they more recently made their range expansion to the northwest and the northeast. And then even more recently, they kind of spread all the way to the east and then south. And so you might be wondering, well, how did that happen? How did they get here? What played a role in that? And there's several factors that I'm going to go over. One was the eradication of wolves. So both gray and red wolves, and there was actually government programs set up to help with this effort, and that was because they were a huge threat to ranchers and their livestock, and that was a big way of life back when this effort was taking place. So because of that effort, there was decreased competition for the coyotes, and therefore that they were able to thrive and kind of fill in that niche that the wolves were previously doing. And then also going on at that time was a lot of changing landscapes or changes of land use, going from more forested habitats. They were being cleared for things like whether it was ag, growing crops, or again for more like ranching and cattle and other livestock. So in terms of coyotes, why this is important is that coyotes actually prefer a more open habitat. And I would be willing to guess, I'm going to ask you guys in a little bit if you've ever seen a coyote, but I'd be willing to bet if you have seen one, it has been in a more open landscape versus a forested landscape. Furthermore, and we'll talk more about both of these factors in a little bit when we talk about the biology, but they have what we call non-specific food and habitat requirements. Some people call this generalist species. And they also have a large litter size, which again, we will talk about more in depth. So again, I like to keep things interactive because I know virtual teaching is not nearly the same as in person. And so if you guys wouldn't mind typing in the chat, if you don't want to do that or can't figure out how to navigate to the chat, you can answer in your head or answer out loud. But this true or false question, coyotes have been documented in every county in Florida. Do you think that is true or false? Okay, perfect. And I pulled up my chat so I can see the answers coming in. There's a good mix. Most people are saying true. Okay, the big reveal. So it is true, yes, coyotes have been documented in every county in Florida. And so this is documented through a variety of different studies, but put all together, they have officially been documented in every county, including down in the Keys. So there's really no escaping coyotes. So I'm here to teach you how to coexist and learn to appreciate coyotes. So now I'm curious, again, you can just type in the chat, how many of you guys have seen a coyote? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to change this slide. Should just say Pinellas County. You can do Florida too. I did a statewide presentation and forgot to change this slide. So you can just say yes, you've seen one, or no, yeah, either way. Okay, someone saw one in Pasco. Yeah, and I guess not all of you are probably reside in Pinellas. Okay, so it's probably like 50-50, yes and no. Crossing Curlew Road. No, and been in Pinellas 50 years. Wow, I actually saw some running across McMullen Booth Road. I've also seen some at the preserve as well. So regardless of what your answer is, oh, I took the map out. Anyway, there is sorry, I have so many versions of this presentation. There is a map on Pinellas County Animal Services where you can report sightings, or you used to be able to report sightings, and the map was just covered in sightings. They're not verified sightings, but either way, it's pretty obvious that coyotes are found all throughout Pinellas County. They actually had to reset the data because the map was just like overwhelmed with dots. So if you haven't seen one, it's probably only a matter of time before you do. Okay, so getting into the biology. So I mentioned before, they're more generalists. They have that non-specific food requirement. So they are also classified as omnivores, which plays into that. Despite what we might think coyotes eat, so small mammals might be an obvious one that you would assume that they would eat, but actually fruits and insects make up another significant portion of their diet. They will also eat dead animals, carrion, whatever your word of choice is for that. And in urban settings like Pinellas County, they have access to garbage and pet food, so they will take advantage of that as well. And in terms of their size, coyotes, I mean, of course they can vary like any species, but on average, the adult males are slightly larger than females, are 25 pounds. And in terms of height off the ground, they're just under 2 feet off the ground. And they can reach their full mature size in less than 2 years. So this is actually a picture from Lou Claudio. He used to work for Pinellas County Communication. Well, he worked in several departments, but this is a picture of a coyote right in his backyard that he gave me permission to use in my presentations. Now, your fun word of the day that you might not be familiar with, or maybe you are, is crepuscular. So coyotes are considered crepuscular, meaning they're most active at dawn and dusk. So right as the sun's coming up and right as the sun is going down is when they're most likely to be active. Doesn't mean that's the only time they're going to be active, just when they're most active. And they are excellent hunters and survivors, which also plays into that range expansion we looked at before. So typically you don't get blessed with like all of your senses being amazing, but coyotes do. So they have awesome eyesight, really good hearing, and an amazing sense of smell. So that aids in their survival. Now, one thing to note is people often associate coyotes and think wolves, and that they're very similar, and there definitely are similarities, but in terms of how they hunt, most often they will be in their mating pair or small family groups. Less often they'll be just alone or in these large packs that we often think about and associate when we think of wolves. And in terms of their reproduction, so they breed once a year, and that'll be coming up in the winter months. Kind of feels like winter right now with this awesome weather. So typically February, March is when they will mate. They have a 2-month gestation period, and then their pups will be born in the spring between April and May. And before, if you remember back, I mentioned they have a large litter size. So, oh, hang on one second. I'm going to pause. This is so my bad. My computer's about to die. Okay. This is like presentation. This is your entertainment. Okay, let's see how long it takes me to plug this in. And y'all can never invite me back as a speaker. This is like rule number 1. Anyway, I have a 15-month-old. Does that give me any leeway? Okay, here we go.
Yes, all the leeway on the planet.
Okay, look at that, back in business. Okay, so I mentioned the large litter size. So on average, they have 6 pups, which for mammals that's a lot. It goes up to, I've seen different research. Some have said a maximum that's been documented is 12 pups. I've also seen 13. So I guess I should go with 13, but I've seen both numbers stated. Another unique feature or characteristic of the coyotes is that both parents will raise the young up until they're 9 months old. So that is, typically dad is out and it's, up to mom. Sometimes mom doesn't even play too much of a significant role after they wean. So that is just a really cool, in my opinion, feature or characteristic or behavior that coyotes do in nature. And then thinking about this, they're sexually mature when they're only 1 year old. So a litter size of 6, sexually mature at 1, you can see how their populations could grow pretty quickly. So thinking again, another aspect of coyote biology, what do you guys think is the average lifespan of a coyote in the wild? And again, you can use the chat and type in your response. Oh man, we've got answers all over the place right now. All right. Okay, there's been pretty much every answer has been thrown out there, so let's see the big reveal. It is 5 to 6 years, so a few of you guys got that one right. So not really very long. I don't know, maybe some of you think that's long. I was kind of surprised it wasn't a little bit longer, honestly. So one of my favorite aspects of coyote biology is they have something that's called density-dependent reproductive response. So that large range in litter size that I mentioned before, average of 6, as many as 12 or 13, that is dependent upon the environment and surrounding coyote populations. So there were efforts to eradicate coyotes in certain areas. This has been done all over the country. And what they found is that as they would eradicate the coyotes, the populations would rebound significantly, very quickly. And that is because of this density-dependent reproductive response. So basically, once some coyotes are removed from an area, the coyotes that remain in the area or will happen to come into that area are like, hey, there's a lot of resources here. There's not a lot of competition. And there's this biological response that enables them to have more pups in that litter so that their populations will grow and rebound very quickly. And opposite is true if coyotes are in an area and there is all of a sudden there's a lot of coyotes, they will tend to have less pups. So I just thought that was a really cool kind of self-control carrying capacity feature that coyotes have. In terms of threats to coyotes, obviously wolves historically would have been Florida panther as well, but we don't really have those, and we definitely don't have those in Pinellas County. So hunting and trapping are by far the #1 threat to coyotes, as well as car strikes, and unfortunately, especially with car strikes, that goes for a lot of species. And then I mentioned before, their average lifespan in the wild. Now, coyotes do use dens, but only when they're raising their pups, and they only use those dens for a short period of time, anywhere from 3 to 10 weeks. So they aren't using their dens year round. And so remember again that they're having pups usually in April and May. So kind of like late spring, early summer is when they're going to be using their dens. And the den sites can vary from just thickets, so something like a palmetto bush area, hollowed out logs, if you have brush piles, large brush piles, or they will even expand burrows of other animals like a gopher tortoise or armadillo. So another neat feature with coyotes is when we look at their home range, so the area or space that they need in order to get all of their essentials that they need to survive, food, water, cover, shelter, we refer to that as their home range. The research shows that the home range size is significantly larger when coyotes are found in a natural area versus an urban setting, which at first I was like, that's crazy. Like I would have thought it would have been the opposite. But then when you think about it, right, coyotes could live, under your front porch, they can get a drink out of your pool and get their meal out of your garbage can. So they don't really have to travel very far to get what they need to survive. That is, especially in natural areas, that number can shift depending on the quality of the habitat, but these are average numbers. And then unfortunately with coyotes, there's not a ton of research out there, especially in Florida. But this one, I just include this piece of data because it's there's not much that we have on movements of coyotes. But this particular coyote that they tracked with a collar traveled 40 miles. It was a juvenile male. Again, they don't know why the male traveled that far, but they were just gathering data to see, how coyotes are moving throughout the state. Okay, another fun trivia game. You can type your answer in the chat. This is kind of like, if you guys remember back to highlights magazines, the compare and contrast. So on the left, we have a coyote track, and on the right, we have a bobcat track. And so what are some differences that you guys notice? And I'll give you a second to type your response in the chat. I'm gonna grab a quick sip of water while you guys are responding. Toenails and size. Toenails, length of toes. Toes close together. You guys are good. Very good. Yes. Okay, perfect. You guys are very good. So yeah, on the left, so generally speaking, when we talk about dogs, wild dogs, so in our case, coyotes or wild cats, so panther and bobcat, when we think about their claw marks and track marks, if you guys have cats at home or dogs, either one, cats have the ability to retract their claws. And when they're out walking around, their claws are retracted. Versus dogs, they have claws and that's it, the end. So they don't have the ability to retract them. So when they are walking around, they tend to leave track marks. It obviously depends on the substrate and just how the coyote is walking. Same with the bobcat. Occasionally the track marks will register, but not always. So a general rule of thumb, if it has claw marks, it's a dog. Just speaking again, cats versus dogs. And you can notice on the bobcat tracks, they're lacking those claw marks. And then somebody mentioned the closeness of the toes. So yes, in general, coyote tracks are very narrow. So they're always longer than they are wide, again, depending on the substrate. But if you were to do an outline, oh, I think that's on my next slide, actually. Yeah, so if you were to do an outline of a coyote print, it's going to be much more oval than, this is a domestic dog, so either way, versus cat. The bobcat track would also be much more like a circle compared to an oval. So when comparing, so some people might be like, well, if I was looking at a coyote track versus a dog track, how would I tell the difference? So two things. One, again, the narrowness of the track. Coyotes tend to only register those top two claw marks. And if you have the opportunity to look at, like, if you have track marks that are going for a little distance, coyotes are they're on a mission. When they're walking, their path tends to be very straight. Whereas those of you that might have a dog know that they're just kind of like, yeah, this looks good over here. And so anyway, domestic dog tracks tend to kind of be all over the place. So that is another thing that you can look for. So another thing, we might not actually get to see the coyotes themselves. So you can look for tracks, but also scat if you have scat in your yard. I don't know whose job it was to go around and measure coyote scat, but the average length of coyote scat was determined to be 4 inches long. And the scat is highly variable depending on their diet. So we mentioned before, they're opportunistic feeders, they're generalists, right? They'll eat mammals, fruits, pet food. So it'll vary depending what they're eating, but typically it will contain the hair of their prey. So you can definitely look for that. And probably the only other scat that would look similar would be bobcat scat. And bobcat scat is much more segmented than coyote scat in general. Okay, so moving on to coyote conflicts. So another poll question for you, true or false? Coyotes cannot transmit diseases to humans, pets, or livestock. Do you guys think that is true or false? Okay, I'm seeing a mix of answers. I'd probably say more false than true has come through. So let's see. So the answer is false. Coyotes can transmit diseases to humans, pets, or livestock. There are dozens of different diseases that have been documented that coyotes can carry. They are host to a ton of different parasites. So again, for those of you that own dogs, we take our pets to the vet to get treated for a lot of these things that we see here on the screen. Obviously, coyotes do not have that opportunity, and so they are carriers to these, which can be transmitted to your pets and livestock. And of course, people often think about rabies as kind of the #1 thing related to humans, and that is incredibly, incredibly rare with coyotes. Now, the reality is some people find relief in this statistic, some people do not, but in general, the risk to pets is significantly greater than the risk to people. They see pets as much more of a threat or as an opportunity for prey. So the good news is it's a very easy problem to fix. So especially with cats, which is one of the probably #1 complaints that we get, is that cats shouldn't be outdoors anyway, especially speaking to Clearwater Audubon. I'm sure you guys very much support that idea, but if you keep your cat indoors, I can give you a 100% guarantee it will not be eaten by a coyote. And then, of course, we do need to take our dogs out to walk and get out and exercise, especially walking your dogs. Our recommendation is not to have those leashes that extend out forever and ever and ever, but 6-foot leashes are recommendation to keep your dog close. And also it will prevent them from, if they do see a coyote and they're scared, they'll typically, their response is to run, which will trigger a chase instinct of the coyote. And if you have that long leash, it gives them, more of an ability to take off and run. So definitely we suggest this pretty much for all wild animals, is definitely not to feed coyotes, because then again, they get accustomed to people and food, and then it eventually leads to them being considered a nuisance species. And then they're often, a trapper will be brought in to kill them. So there's lots of things that we can do to prevent coyotes from getting habituated to humans, and I'll talk a little bit about those coming up. And then, I don't know if you'll like this slide or not either, but in terms of the fear factor of coyotes, when you look at the statistics on bites from coyotes versus domestic dogs that we invite into our homes, the number of bites per year for a coyote is only 3.5 compared to the documented almost 5 million bites per year from dogs. So I'll leave it at that. Take that for what it is, depending on how much you love dogs or hate coyotes, or my hope is that you'll come to appreciate coyotes more after this. So how can we learn to coexist with coyotes? I mentioned before, we never want to feed coyotes, or really any wild animal for that matter. Preventing access to your garbage and pet food, that's huge. And that also, again, applies to many other possible like nuisance or pest species. Like if you don't want possums or raccoons, this will help with that. So they do make, animal-proof garbage cans. If you do leave pet food out, we encourage you to bring it in at least at night. Keeping cats indoors, we talked about that. Watching especially small dogs, because small dogs look more like prey to a coyote. If it's a larger dog, they'll more see them as a threat, and they tend to be more territorial when they are raising their pups. So thinking in the springtime. If you do get approached by a coyote, which has happened, the goal is to instill fear back in the coyote. So I usually say, act like a crazy person, but you just want to make yourself seem big. You want to, wave your arms. You want to shout and act aggressively. You don't want to retreat away from the coyote, because then they might just continue to follow. So you need to kind of stand your ground and instill fear back in the coyote. Now with children, it's important that or small pets, If you can, pick them up, because again, their likely instinct is going to be to run, which will trigger that chase instinct of the coyote. So, and there is a lot of outreach that the Florida Fish and Wildlife continues to do. I don't honestly know if they're still doing this particular program. They would allow you guys to rent's not the right word, borrow these A-frame signs that would then have information on how to coexist with coyotes in an urban area. So another thing, if you guys do have crawl spaces underneath your home or sheds or porches or anything like that, you can consider closing them off if you don't want coyotes taking advantage of that space. Teaching your kids or grandkids not to run. And of course, sharing what you learned today is very helpful for me. I am one person and there's close to 1 million people in Pinellas County, so I can only do so much, but I'm grateful that this is being shared and will be posted on YouTube. It's on Facebook now, so hopefully the word will get out and we'll all become educated citizens and residents of Pinellas County. Now, I have like 2 more slides. So there is something called, I used to have this slide be called coyote hazing, because that is the terminology that's used among wildlife specialists. I reframed it to coexisting with coyotes. So these are some techniques that you can use if you do have a coyote that's in your area that seems to be kind of getting comfortable with people. Or things that you can just kind of keep on hand with you. So one is bear spray. You can use bear spray just as you would with a bear on a coyote if it is approaching and getting too close. Using a hose or water gun. So if you're in your yard or garden or something and you see a coyote approaching, you can spray water at the coyote, because again, that's not going to harm the coyote, but it will scare it off. Air horn, so any loud noise or a whistle. You can, and I'm going to stress these next few things because you're probably like, why are these things on this lady's slide? Throwing a stick or stone. This is toward the coyote, not at the coyote. Our goal is not to hit or injure or harm the coyote in any way. It is simply to instill fear in the coyotes that we don't want you to get close to us and you shouldn't get close to us. The walking stick or golf club is more to make yourself look bigger. And not, again, not to hit the coyote in any way. Paintball gun, same thing, would just be to shoot near the coyote, not to hit the coyote. Because again, if you end up with an injured coyote, you're gonna have more problems on your hand than one that's getting too close. And then you can create, they call these coyote shakers. So this could be a fun kind of family project. You can get an aluminum can and fill it with coins or pebbles, and it makes a really loud noise. And so again, anything that makes a loud noise will work. The trick with coyotes is they're incredibly smart. So you have to kind of switch up your techniques if you have a persistent coyote. They'll just kind of figure out like, yeah, you can keep blowing that air horn, but I'm going to keep going for your pet food. So, but you won't have your pet food out, so that won't be a problem. Now, if you do have a problem, the Florida Fish and Wildlife has a list of nuisance wildlife trappers. Florida Fish and Wildlife themselves is not going to come out to do anything. They just don't have the resources to do that. But they do have a list on their website where you can search by county for nuisance wildlife trappers, and then they list the species that the wildlife trapper will come out. So you could look for the ones that list coyotes, and then it will be at your expense to have that trapper come out. And typically the result is that the coyote will be euthanized or killed. Okay, so this is one of the shorter versions of my presentation because I did want to allow time for Q&A. So I will hand it back over to the panelists for that.
Thank you so much. Fun and informative. That's great. We did have one follow-up question in the chat about the statistics for coyote bites and dog bites. Was that for the state of Florida or was that for the entire US? State of Florida?
Good question. That is for the entire US.
Oh, good. Phew.
Yes, yes, yes.
That would be a very high number of dog bites.
I think I saw a few. I'm sure you guys were probably answering in the chat. I know I saw a few questions
Just a couple
coming in throughout.
Right. So you can enter a question in the chat, or you can enter a question in the Q&A. Either way, we'll be glad to get with you.
Okay, and I see a question from David. Does Pinellas have any larger predators? So not in Pinellas. I mean, the biggest potential threat would be bobcats, but there's been research on kind of the overlap of those two species, and they tend to just avoid, they can live in the same, I always used to give an analogy. So like if you guys are football fans and know the Gators and the Seminoles, right? We might all be in the same stadium, but as a Gator, I'm not going to go over to the FSU side and vice versa. So they'll occupy similar spaces, but they kind of won't go into each other's territory. So yeah, there really aren't any other predators for coyotes.
We have a question in the Q&A asking, do coyotes prey on deer?
Yes, so it's not a common prey item, and if they do, they will go after the fawns. Florida panthers are much more likely to go after deer and larger deer, but yeah, occasionally they will, but it's not, definitely not, you know, a significant source of mortality. Coyotes aren't preying on deer in a significant way. Okay, and are there any larger packs known in Pinellas? So again, coyotes don't live or exist in these kind of packs. They do have what we call like family units. So I guess it just depends on your perception of packs. So the family unit would obviously be the pups. So it's on average of 6, and then the 2 adults. So it is a pretty significant number, but again, the pups are going to be young. There again, unfortunately, isn't a lot of research done, so we don't really have any data other than when they had that self-reporting tool through Pinellas County Animal Services. That's the only data, and again, that was never verified data. So no, I don't know of any packs known in Pinellas. I do know that golf courses in general, as well as cemeteries, are some of the more common places that coyotes are found in the county.
In the Q&A, we have a question about a hybrid variety of coyotes and wolves.
Yeah, so there's many different, I guess, hybrids out there. A lot of genetic research that is being done or has been done in other parts of the country. There was research being done in Florida, and unfortunately the funding for that went away. So we don't know specifically in Florida what we have. There is the ability for them to be hybrids. The chances are not very likely in the wild for that hybridization to occur. So, but in terms of exactly what we have here in Florida, we just don't have that research. Have they ever been known to fish? So that's a good question. And somebody else asked me that question before, and I would have to go back. I'm pretty sure, because I followed up. I have a friend who works with the Florida Fish and Wildlife. I will follow up. My recollection is that they have been documented to eat fish. Again, it's not a common source of food, and more likely if they did, it would likely be fish that have been caught by a bird like osprey or something that has fallen down, and the coyotes are just taking advantage of it. I don't know that they would pursue going fishing, but yeah, again, they're opportunistic. So if the opportunity presents itself, they will likely eat it. And I'm going to follow up on that too, because I might have that in my email to confirm.
Lara, Barb is asking if there are any population controls efforts.
There are not that I'm aware of, at least not in Pinellas County. I know there has been discussions over the years of doing different measures, but unfortunately, again, because of that density dependent reproductive response, there's there's just nothing that's really cost effective. So the approach that the Florida Fish and Wildlife recommends is just if there is a nuisance coyote, that particular coyote is removed, but otherwise it's more of a just learning to coexist with them, and they'll kind of self-regulate their populations. Okay, and I see another question of how many coyotes in Pinellas, and again, unfortunately, we just don't have we don't have numbers or data. I couldn't even begin to guess because we just really don't have anything to go on. If anybody wants to pursue a grant, do some funding, fundraising to get some data, that would be awesome. But sadly, there's no way for me to answer that question. It's a good question, and I would love to know myself too.
And get some trail cameras on golf courses.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we just set up our trail camera. I meant to mention this in Brooker Creek Preserve, and got a ton of, well, it could have been the same coyotes, but we got a lot of coyotes setting off our camera. We posted that on the Brooker Creek Preserve Facebook page. So they're definitely here. We know that. All right, is a nuisance coyote moved to another area? No, nuisance coyotes are killed. Just be straight up. Yeah, they're not protected in any way. Is the population stable? Yeah, as far as I know, there's no like major threats, or they're not exploding in population, and there's no major threats. They're super smart and adaptable. So even in a very urban county such as Pinellas, they are able to survive and thrive.
We have someone in the Q&A reporting that they saw a male and a female walking on the par 3 Largo golf course early in the morning.
Yeah, so there you go, golf course. I know, I'd be curious. I should ask the question instead of have you seen them, where have you seen one if you have, because I'd be willing to bet a lot of them are golf courses. And I don't know if I missed anything else in the chat from earlier, but I'm happy to answer any other questions that you guys might have. And I'm always available. Again, my contact information is on the screen. So if you guys ever have a follow-up question or want me to present to another group that you're involved with, you can always send me an email or give me a call. It's my job. It's what I'm here to do. So. Do they eat snakes? That is another excellent question. I don't know. My guess would be I'm sure that they have. And I will add that to my list to follow up with my friend, because there has been some research on diet using roadkill coyote. They will collect the stomachs and analyze them. So, but I don't know that, I've never seen anything specifically about snakes, but I will find out. Okay.
I have one question in the Q&A about the purity of the coyotes. Like, are they, is the breed, I guess you would say, is that still preserved, do you think, or has that been diluted?
Yeah, I don't know that we have the data to really answer that question. The assumption is that the genetics will include some genes going back, including some wolves, like they call them coy wolves, or So we, again, just don't have the data to show what we have here in Florida. I wouldn't say there's really a concern though, regardless of what we have, you know, they're thriving and they're filling in a niche that was formerly, we did used to have red wolves here in Florida, and obviously the Florida panther, which we don't anymore, at least not here in Pinellas County. So they're filling a critical need regardless of kind of the makeup of their genes. And I should do a pop quiz with you guys of which bird is over my right shoulder.
I think we have a couple more in the chat.
Oh, let me see. Do you hear of many dead coyotes, and is research done on them? So, and yes, it is a chickadee. I don't particularly hear of many dead coyotes. I mean, certainly I've seen some, and I know that they're out there, especially in Pinellas County, with as many coyotes that I would assume we have, and how many, unfortunately, people and cars that we have here. So the University of Florida, in collaboration with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, was doing research on coyotes. They would have roadkill again collected to analyze stomach contents, and they were again pursuing at one point genetic testing. That the latest I've heard is that research is no longer happening. So that it used to be done. And it probably, you know, when funding comes back or a grad student wants to pursue that, then I'm sure it'll happen again. All right. So yeah, I will mention that we have a YouTube channel as well through Pinellas County Extension, and we have a ton of our past programs that have been archived there. There's short videos for like comparing and contrasting commonly confused species, and longer presentations like this that are archived there. We just did a needs assessment survey, and most people want on-demand programming, and so it's there for you on our YouTube channel. So definitely check it out if you guys haven't, or you can always follow us on Facebook as well. And yeah, I don't have anything else unless you guys have any more questions for me.
Well, just to let everyone know that a recorded version of this webinar will be available on our Facebook page, as we were live on Facebook. And it will also be on our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, you can see all our past programs. You can just go to our Clearwater Audubon page, scroll all the way to the bottom. All of our social media links are there, including the YouTube channel. Once again, I'd like to thank Lara Milligan for her time to that. I also want to thank each of you for your continued support of Clearwater Audubon. I believe there's a short survey when you leave the Zoom tonight. And we'll see all of you hopefully on a birding field trip soon or online. Be sure to join us for our January program, and we'll be sending out more information about that soon. So Merry Christmas, everyone. We appreciate you showing up tonight.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you.